you never want to make a trade just to make a trade in this league. Because then it's like, what? Oh, to win a headline for the fans to pop. You got to make the right trade.
Yep.
But I look at someone like Brandon Ingram. I think this is the right trade.
I hope.
Now, if you're talking to the Pelicans, you're not offering up Keegan Murray. That's just not happening. That's just, no, we're good. We're good. He's on an expiring deal. That Brandon Ingram, there's got to be other ways to get this deal done. And I think that's probably what's being talked about. I think Brandon Ingram would be a great fit in Sacramento. I think him playing with a point guard again would be really beneficial for him. He thrived when he played with Lonzo Ball, when he played with Drew Holiday, played in an up-tempo system where he did take more threes and he knocked them down. He's an elite mid-range guy. He's got good size at 6'9". He's got a 7'3" wingspan, over 9-foot standing reach. I was watching him today, watching some of his clips, defense and offense, and he did some nice things on both ends. I think he could be even better defensively too. And I think it would allow Sacramento to get some legit versatility on the end. And then offensively, you can give him the ball and he can go get a bucket.
Yep. And it would be great. It'd be a great fit. Also, I mean, if you do want to talk about some of his cons, though, it again goes back to his health and the amount of games that he has played for the last couple of seasons. I love these numbers. 55, 45, 64. And that alone just always scares me, especially with a roster constructed like the Sacramento Kings. When you lose one of those guys, the identity of what they're trying to accomplish and do just isn't going to be good enough in the Western Conference. And sure, injuries can happen everywhere. And then you see that the one season, 2 seasons ago when the Kings made the playoffs, where we could say that they were pretty healthy. Really, they were just all playing on the floor with broken hands, fingers, whatever the hell else was going on with their bodies. But they stayed out. They had injuries that they could stay out there with. Last year, you saw how it can affect you, the rhythm, the identity, the strategy of just like what needs to happen, how you can really build that continuity on the defensive end, especially when you don't have a whole bunch of fantastic individual defenders. You need to make sure that your team defense is out there on the floor, always practicing together, getting better, and better. And so when you do miss out on one of those pieces and it screws with everything, that's the only thing that I would say really worries me ever with Brandon Ingram. But yeah, I would take him in a heartbeat. Yes.
I think the other thing too is, like, you look at some of his injuries last year. He had a left leg contusion at one point. He hyperextended his right knee. Some of these injuries aren't like, oh man, he tore his ACL and he needs surgery. You know, like that's one area where you go, okay, maybe with your training staff, your medical staff, you put him in a good position and he's fine. But yeah, there's a risk there. I think that's fair. And that's what you're looking at with some of these guys available. There's going to be warts. And I think that's probably one of them with Brandon Ingram. And I think some people go, yeah, he was an all-star, but that was a long time ago. I still think he's a really good player. And I think he has another level he could still get to and get back to that all-star level. You start thinking about the potential of him playing with Fox and Sabonis and Keegan. Like, offensively, that could be a lot of fun. And for the Kings to have someone that has, again, you need size, you need length, that would go a long way. I think the one area that would be concerning for Sacramento is like, all right, you probably play him at small forward, and then you put Keegan at power forward. Are you still at a disadvantage from a rebounding perspective and going up against, some of the elite size in the league?
Yeah, I guess. But also, I don't know. I look at this whole situation too, and I go, okay, well, what are you going to have to give up to get to this point? I know we keep talking about a third team being involved. If that was the case and they just had to mortgage some of their future and that was it, and they didn't have to really screw with too much of what assets on the roster that they may have right now. Like, that's the only way that you're going to even see success. Like, you can't get rid of Keegan. Like, I
don't think Keegan's on the table.
I know that. I feel like I know that, but at the same time too, I'm just putting it out there sometimes, and then we talk about, oh, Harrison Barnes or Kevin Huerter, and I still think Kevin has a lot to give. And not to say Harrison Barnes doesn't either, especially on like a young team, being that vet in the locker room, all the different things, and even still on the basketball floor. I mean, you talk about him staying healthy and on the floor for the most part as well. So yeah, I always get nervous on like, well, what is it that you have to get up? And then what does the roster actually look like with Brandon Ingram on there at that point? So
it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And I think you look at what happened with the Warriors today in the last couple of days, right? They thought they maybe had a chance at Paul George. And this offseason, they lose out on Paul George. Chris Paul's no longer there. And then Klay Thompson, who had been with their team for 13 seasons, dips out. He goes to the Dallas Mavericks. The two sides complete a sign and trade. We'll talk about that in a bit. But, like Golden State, are they going to just be like, yeah, okay, well, we missed out. They signed DeAnthony Melton today, too. That was the other thing. They're not going to be like, all right, well, I think we're good. No. They've got some stuff to do.
Yeah.
And they've got an owner in Joe Lacob that's probably all fired up and going, you know what? Klay said no to us. He went to Dallas. We're going to go after Markkanen, which they've been tied to today. And Brandon Ingram, they've been tied to. So what could that look like? I think it's kind of the next phase of this NBA offseason. What happens there when you've got Ingram available? You still have Markkanen, who is seemingly available now. And then on the fringes for Sacramento, I'm sure they're still thinking about Kuzma. They're still thinking about Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's still some pieces out there that hopefully that you can have conversations with and try and make the proper tweaks to this roster to get better. Because you mentioned someone like Cam Johnson. It's not going to move the needle, but it's a better piece on your roster. And I think that's something that over the years, especially with this organization, you always see them like kind of picking up the scraps, and you got to make sure that you are doing so much more than that, especially in this very competitive Western Conference.
And they still have their mid-level that they can use over $12 million. They could use that in free agency or in a trade. So there's some options there, but you got to be able to close something this summer, especially with you look at where the West is. OKC got better again. Hartenstein's going there. That was the other thing that happened overnight. That's a big-time pickup for them after getting Alex Caruso, and that team's just going to get better. Minnesota, they have been tied to Lauri Markkanen too.
Dude,
I don't even know how they would do that.
Yeah. Well, but even for the Kings, I can if we can move on to.
Yeah, let's talk about Markkanen for a second, because the first people that brought it up today, Damian Barling, D'Lo and KC, and James Ham, they were talking about this today on ESPN 1320 in Sacramento. And then Jake Fisher put something out.
Ooh.
He said, in addition to Golden State, Sacramento and San Antonio have been two other teams characterized by league figures with knowledge of the situation as strong possible suitors for Markkanen at this point. For the Kings to land Markkanen, NBA personnel believe the Jazz would require Sacramento to part with Keegan Murray, and that might leave other trade options like Brandon Ingram as more palatable for the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah, No.
Man, Markkanen.
I
first
love
of all,
Lauri Markkanen.
He makes like $18 million. He's in the final year, so he's going to need a new deal too. But you think about him at 7 foot, his ability to shoot the ball. I think he plays tougher than people realize. His length is there, and you think about the modern NBA, you think of Lauri Markkanen. I don't know what to believe when it comes to Utah Jazz. Like Danny Ainge, like good luck making a trade with this guy.
Yeah.
He's going to want a shit ton. And I have no doubt in my mind that he'd be like, okay, yeah, I do want Keegan Murray. I want like 17 picks because Markkanen made an all-star team. Well, Mikal Bridges didn't, and he got all those picks from the Knicks.
Yeah.
So I look at the Markkanen one, Morgan, I just go, I don't feel like this one's feasible. I don't think Sacramento can get him.
That's fair. And I mean, if I'm going to put that con on Brandon Ingram about games played and everything as well, it's not like Markkanen's is his number every season is that much higher.
Yeah.
Last 3 seasons, 61, 66, 55, right? And I mean, in last year it was weird, whatever. But either way, it's another guy that you look at his injury history and you go, okay, where is he going to go from here? Also, with these two guys that we are talking about, you also have to believe that they want to re-sign with you. And
right.
That's why when there is something like, oh, Keegan would have to be involved, screw that shit. Like, no. One, Keegan is just going to get better. Like, I feel that to my core. But on top of that, why would you screw with your future on such a big risk? Especially when someone like Brandon Ingram might be less of a risk if it's just other assets that either you don't believe in as much or maybe draft picks, whatever it may be. Like, you got to make sure you're going in that direction and still getting a good player. And even then, you just, again, don't know if they're going to even resign.
Yeah, for me, and this is what's hard, right? Because you're trying to make a trade to get better in the Western Conference. You're like, okay, yeah, but we don't want to give up Fox, Monk, Sabonis, or Murray. You can have anything else. Oh, and no Devin Carter, right? So then you start adding these names, and these teams are going, okay, well, we're going to like keep searching because like all the things that we might have interest in, you're not willing to give up. Utah, I don't know exactly what their plan is because we've heard some reports that at one point they were trying to get Mikal Bridges to add to this team. And now it's like maybe they're trying to pivot here. Maybe the pivot is, you know what? Let's see if we can shop him. We just saw what Bridges can get. If we can get a shit ton of picks coming back, we've got all the other picks from the Gobert trade, the Mitchell trade. Let's keep building this. Let's just be bad for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. It also, another point too, like you think about when Monty McNair had to make the tough decision to trade Tyrese Halliburton. And at that point, though, it felt like there was just that team had no identity. There was no direction with where they're going. And I think now when you look at this roster, it's like they want to go in a direction, but they don't have still enough assets that they can get rid of to still be a solid team in the West. Unless you can manage it the right way and somehow figure out how to get BI here, third team involved, and then you're just mortgaging more of your future with some draft picks and some other players.
Yeah, and the Kings are in an interesting spot with their draft picks because they still owe Atlanta that stupid pick because they didn't make the playoffs last year, right? Now, if Devin Carter pays off, you're going to be like, hell yeah, glad that you got that pick. Maybe it's all worth it in the end. But you could trade the 2028 pick, the 2030 pick, and then you can orchestrate some pick swaps. But is that enough for someone like Lauri Markkanen? I don't think so. I don't think that's going to move the needle enough. And for me, I'm about adding to this. Like, I want to keep Keegan because he's on a rookie scale contract. He's 6'9" with size, and it looks like he could play both sides of the ball. I want this guy on my team.
I love this chat right here. I'm not sure how to say the name, but I might be in the minority, but I am totally fine keeping this team as is. Making a trade to make the podcasters happy is a big mistake. Monty and Co. are smarter about what they have and what they need.
The podcasters happy? I don't think it's just us.
I'm just happy with winning.
You act like we got like a pitchfork and we're about to like burn down Golden One Center.
Go.
God. No, I'm not saying that, but I think, look, the perspective is simple. I said this before any of these rumors were popping up. You got to upgrade the 4 spot. You know, you have to become more athletic. You have to have some better defenders. You have to make sure you still have shooting too. And you're going to need guys to take a step. So how do you go about that? It wasn't necessarily going to be in free agency. You weren't going to address maybe one of those needs. It's about doing it within the trade market, using the resources you do have to try to get that shit done. And so if you ran it back with this group, let's play your scenario. Let's say the Kings are like, well, they pick up like one more, like, I don't know, mid-level guy, right? That's not going to not a star by any means, but like a good role player with the rest of the cap space. And you add Devin Carter, they could go, yeah, you know what? We might be better and Keegan's going to be better. And maybe we win some more games. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe you get off to a slow start. And then guys are frustrated because they're really feeling expectations after what happened last year.
Yeah.
And then it just all goes bad. And then the fans are feeling weird. And the reality is you can't in the West because everyone else is chasing.
And getting better and better.